the wind of change was there. That kind of breeze is not blowing behind David Cameron.
I think that may be the story of the election so far, at least, which is whatever the opinion polls say, so many people have not really made up their minds. Do you agree with that? In other words, there are, of course, some dyed-in-the-wool Labour people, Conservative people and the Dems, but actually the support for a lot of the parties is soft, and there's still everything to play for, which is why there's a degree of desperation in all the parties.
Sure, and Labour is making it very hard to want to support them, even though I think the Conservatives will be considerably worse. You know, I mean, to me, the absolute epitaph for the Blair years is Stephen Byers being caught on camera saying, "I'm a cab for hire, any regulation you want got rid of, we can do it." It's absolutely appalling. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that there is a good reason why these rich business leaders should be against them. This week, the Institute for Fiscal Studies showed rich people are £25,000 a year worse off. Poor people, the poorest 10%, are £1,700 a year better off. So there has been redistribution from rich to poor. Now, I think that's a good thing. Of course, if you're very rich and very selfish, you're going to oppose that. But actually, Labour should be defending that, saying, well, we are too unequal. 80% of British people think Britain is too unequal. Of course, that means that some people at the very top are going to have to pay some price for that. But we should be proud of that, instead of trying to say, oh, and you're absolutely right as well, that, you know, people should remember the cost of listening to these people. For 20 years, we listened to these people and it crashed the global economy. We did everything they said. We deregulated virtually everything. And it didn't lead to the economic prosperity they claimed.
And we go back to this thing that I think there are lessons to be learned on the continent, where, not Greece and Spain, of course, but on Germany. That has been a very cautious economy where people didn't overspend, where the state was overspent, where you had very big state intervention, where it's regulated, and this is the future. It's on that side, not the Anglo-Saxon model.
Can I just talk about where the voters are at now? But you were saying a number of voters being undecided. I think that this is going to be a very close campaign, and we may well see a hung parliament in the UK. And is there anything wrong with that? I think it's going, if it does come out to being that, it's going to be an interesting exercise for this country, where parties actually have to work together to make policies work.
It will be
like in Holland.
Oh, like in Scotland, as some
Scotland.
of us have actually noticed for the past couple of years.
Alex Salmond was the emperor of Scotland. He comports himself as such.
Well, he's a minority emperor if he is, and I think he would object to that. But in other words, a hung parliament may, that's what the polls say at the moment, who knows. But it can work in this country. It does work in Scotland.
Well, except my memory of hung parliaments is when I was a student here all those decades ago, and you couldn't quite get any traction at all with the major problems, economic and social, that Britain faced in the early 1970s. And if you've got hard
decisions, which they had in the 70s, you can't take them because you haven't got the support.
Well, but here's the interesting thing, because you talk about hard decisions. There are hard decisions, but there are no clear answers. And I think that this is the problem that Cameron, in particular, is having in separating himself out. The Tories can't go back to being what they were, and so everybody's kind of stuck in this squishy middle, knowing that it's an impossible. I mean, there is no blade to cut this particular Gordian knot.
Yeah, but I just want to say that the real difference is Europe. You know, you have the Labour and Lib Dem who are very pro-European, and you have this nasty Tories still anti-European, siding with the horrible people in the European Parliament, extreme right-wing. They are a toxic party.
Really? You've just opened up another can of worms, which we haven't got time to get into today. But we have got time to talk very briefly about Barack Obama visiting Afghanistan, which is clearly, he hopes, a prelude to a successful military offensive, a political offensive, and getting out.
Jumbo-sized can of worms, actually, still, I think. Yes, big offensive coming in the Kandahar region. The president is taking full advantage of the win on healthcare to just put himself back out there. He had to stay so focused for 90 days on getting that bill through Congress. And he went off to Afghanistan. But I still think that for the Americans, just based on stuff that's been going on over the last 48 hours, the big problem remains the government in Afghanistan. Is it a partner? And you know, without saying, well, is it a poodle? No. I mean, the idea is to help Afghan sovereignty take root, but the Karzai government remains a problem. And there was a speech he gave, I think it was 2 days ago, where he was saying, oh, you know, there was all of the corruption in the election last year was the fault of the UN and the way it was reported by Western journalists, that there was in fact no corruption. He had to take a 20-minute phone call from Hillary. You know, it's highly problematic. The thing is that Karzai has been trying to get closer to China. China and the US have business over Iran and a variety of trade issues. That side of things will always, I think, will continue to be a drag on whatever progress is made militarily against the Taliban.
Mark?
I haven't changed my opinion. The war is a just war. We owe it to the Afghan people, particularly the women, that the Taliban don't come into power. But it doesn't mean we have to support Karzai, who is anyway badly elected. And we could find a deal with the Taliban, even paying them. They like money, it looks like, so we pay them and we bring them into a coalition. And Karzai goes. But as far as fundamentally, this war is just.
Johann?
My friend Malalai Joya, probably the bravest woman in Afghanistan, an elected female MP, ran a secret school for girls under the Taliban, says that outside the kind of Potemkin city of Kabul, we've simply transferred power from the disgusting fundamentalist Taliban to disgusting fundamentalist warlords who treat women pretty much exactly the same. General Jim Jones, President Obama's national security advisor, says there are 100 al-Qaeda fighters in the whole of Afghanistan. I think the premises upon which this war is being fought are just flawed. Al-Qaeda doesn't need bases. The 7/7 attacks were planned in Yorkshire. The 9/11 attacks were planned in Florida and Hamburg. It is not true that we're significantly improving the human rights situation. And it's playing into the hands of Al-Qaeda.
You know that nobody is going to say we are going to go to war and risk British or American or other lives in Afghanistan for the women of Afghanistan. That is, however moral that case may be, that is not why the war was launched, and it's not why it continues.
Sure,
so it's not going to happen.
No, of course. I agree with you. But that's why we shouldn't use it as a propaganda excuse for a war that is about very different things and is not improving the situation of women at all. But it's also worth bearing in mind, Osama bin Laden was very clear about this.
It is better know the situation that it was under the Taliban.
I think Malalai Joya, who is the most heroic elected female Afghan MP,
sure she is,
says there is no difference.
But the situation is better because at least there have been election and you don't have this Taliban in power.
Well, the corrupt elections that were imposed. But you and I are not Afghan women. They speak for themselves. They say the situation is not better.
The obstacles that are facing Obama in trying to get this war out of the way for him and to finish it is Karzai, who actually was calling members of that election commission when they were investigating corruption last year, offering them posts in his government. He doesn't understand what democracy is all about. So you've got to find a way to either deal with him or put him aside. On the military front, if they think they're going to finish the fight in a year and a half, then they're fooling themselves. They've got the Dutch are ready to pull out. The Canadians are pulling out next year, and Hillary Clinton was in Canada last week asking them to stay on because they know they can't prosecute this war properly without
Germans killed in the northeastern part of the country, which they have been given because of the German fighting force in NATO is historically looking for the non-combatant roles, and now they're being sucked into it because the Taliban are going to the northeast.
We're going to say goodbye. Thank you all very much. That's it for Dateline London for this week. We will be back next week at the same time. Do join us then. Goodbye.